What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tierfon Orbital. I hope everyone had a happy holiday and end of 2024. I took some significant time off. Well, it wasn't too long. I took a week off for Christmas, and then I got sick after Christmas, so I've just kind of been out of commission for the past couple of weeks. I don't know if you can tell. I'm just finally getting over this upper respiratory wonderful bug that's been going around, just a typical winter cold, right? But I'm finally feeling back to 100%, so it is time to do some demo videos, right? So today I'd like to talk about a very special series or a couple of installs. It's 2 installs on the same hilt for a Grif Lightsabers Malus. Now, if you haven't heard of Grif, his name is Brad. Grif's Custom Lightsabers. He is an old timer in the hobby. I don't really want to say old timer, but he's been around for a while. Anytime that I get a chance to get one of Grif's pieces come across my desk, I always get excited. Every time I have held one of these hilts in my hand, it has always been the same experience. They are incredibly well made, incredibly detailed, perfectly machined, an absolute pleasure to install on. They are always just the top notch of, custom lightsabers. Okay. The upper echelon, right, of sabersmith. So Brad is a sabersmith. He makes custom one-offs, and this was part of a run. I think that he did a run of the Malus hilts. This one, however, is a special one in that it is a staff. I don't believe I've seen any of these staffs out in the wild, right? This is the only one that I've come across. So this one was an absolute pleasure to design a chassis for. It was a breeze to install on. So yeah, anytime I get one of Grif's parts or pieces in my hands, it's always the same with me. I mean, I don't want to say I can be hypercritical, but when I get something from a sabersmith, one of the first things that I start to do is I start to examine the exterior of the hilt, right? Not because I'm trying to be critical, but because I know how much work goes into a well-made lightsaber. I am no machinist. I have worked around metalworkers and machinists before, but I can certainly appreciate the amount of work and thought that goes into not only like the design and composition and profile of a hilt, but also the actual like machining of it, right? Are the threads buttery smooth? Are the greeblies all symmetrical, and do they look like they belong on the hilt and they're not just like thrown together, right? These are all things that when I get one of Grif's hilts in my hands, it's always a 10 out of 10 every time. The threading is always perfect. The greeblies are always symmetrical. It's just they're all always wonderfully designed. I am actually lucky enough to have one of Grif's hilts in my collection. It's one of my favorite lightsabers. So they're always a pleasure to get. Not to mention they're always very unique, very cool looking. I don't think Grif has ever done like a replica Canon hilt. They're always, this is stuff that comes from the mind of Brad. So yeah, cannot speak highly enough of the product that comes out of his workshop. Okay. With this particular install, right? So it being a staff, essentially we've got 2 of the Malus hilts at each end, and then a special coupler in between that makes it a staff. This is actually the coupler, right? One of the things that I also appreciate from an installing standpoint is when I get a hilt that is a breeze to design a chassis for and install. With this particular install, there was, plenty of room on the inside to get a 28mm speaker. There was extra room, actually, I think it was at like 29mm, so that gives me a little bit of play with not only the speaker, but like adding brass components to the chassis. This particular chassis is one of my hybrid chassis. I call it a hybrid chassis just because it's got mixed material in it, okay? The main body of the chassis is done in MJF Nylon, and then there are some brass parts as well. And I had a lot of fun designing this chassis. I did something a little different, a couple of things a little bit different with this design. And I do want to come into Fusion and talk about that, right? And then, of course, we'll do the whole thing. We'll come up top, get a closer look at the chassis. We will do a quick demo, and then we will be on our way. All right? So with all of that out of the way, I'm I'm going to stop rambling. Let's come into fusion. All right, so here it is. This is the chassis for the Grif Lightsabers Malus staff. So let's start at the bottom, okay? 28 millimeter speaker down here. This is from Smuggler's Outpost. This is a Dark Side Elite speaker. Dark Side Elite bass speaker, rather. So, you know, one of the things that I mentioned at the top of the video was the fact that there's plenty of room on the inside of this hilt, right? Just over 28 millimeters. So I had plenty of wiggle room to play with a brass battery cover. You know, there's plenty of room for that speaker to get into the grip. So, you know, right off the bat, I knew that this was going to be a fun build, right? Anytime I've got anything over 28 millimeters, that means I can stack a board and a battery and also get a brass battery cover, okay? Around back here, this is where our Profi board sits, okay? It does tuck up underneath this lip a little bit to help it secure. I do have greeblies on each side of the chassis as well. Brass battery cover. But what I really, really liked about this design was this upper reveal. So this is something that I have been doing lately. I've kind of switched up my design aesthetic a little bit just to make these brass parts look a little bit more functional, make them look a little bit more industrial. Okay, I'm really, really stoked with how this came out. A lot of like pipe work. There are some panels in here. I've got like these heatsink fins in here. Just a lot going on. This one took a little bit longer to design for than my usual crystal chambers, but I really had a lot of fun doing this one. I'm really happy with how this ended up printing or casting in brass. It just looks so, so good, right? I do have some room for rectangular LED accents. That's what these guys are here. But yeah, I'm really, really happy with the way that this one came out. Okay. The other reason that I did the part like this, so, you know, usually we're used to seeing like a crystal chamber up here, and that's what I usually do. But because we have an exposed crystal chamber up top, I was able to do something a little bit different down here. And this is kind of where I'm going when I have room to do stuff like this. I like the look of this. It looks like just like an engine part or actual electronics. But I really, really like the way that this one came out. As a matter of fact, the upcoming like convergence run that I'm doing with my buddy Jeremy from Solo Sabers, the upper reveal section is something like this as well. But I'm just kind of trying to switch up my design aesthetic. I'm trying to, like, you know, not stay the same. I always like to change things up and continuously improve, right? So I'm just like really happy with how this one came out, this upper section. Making our way up, there is like a sleeve here. Okay, I've got a hole in that area for my switch leads. Okay, so on the outside of this hilt, there is a nice brass cover for brass hat tactile switches, and that's where I bring my leads up for that, for those two switches. And then up top, we've got an exposed crystal chamber in this hilt. Anytime I see an exposed crystal chamber, I really, really love that. I love seeing the crystal chamber on the outside of the hilt, right? So I did do a crystal chamber reveal up here as well. And I did something a little bit different in this crystal chamber. So these two posts, there's one back here and one up here, are hollow. My initial intention was to have like a circular LED up here, or a round LED, just to add extra blinkies and accents into the crystal chamber. Unfortunately, with how the tolerances are with wax cast brass printing or manufacturing, I was not able to make this any bigger. So instead of using a round LED, the round LED was just too big. I've got SMD LEDs in both of these, and those are both wired up through here. Let me isolate this crystal chamber really quick. Okay, they come up through the bottom of the crystal chamber right here in these two holes. There's one here, and then there's one underneath. And that is how I wire up those SMD LEDs. Really, really love how that came out. I wanted to do something a little bit different in the crystal chamber and have some extra accent because you don't actually see this entire, you don't actually see the entire crystal chamber. It is not hidden, but there are 3 windows on the outside of the hilt, so you don't see the whole thing in full plain view. So I wanted to get some extra accents just to draw the eye to that crystal chamber a little bit more. Okay. All of the leads are brought up through this back conduit up to that PCB emitter, and this is just a cap that is epoxied onto the top where my lit PCB emitter sits. This is from KR Sabers, this one up here. Real quartz point in this guy that is lit from below with a single neopixel, and it looks really, really great. I'm super, super happy with how this one came out. Just this midsection, I just like really love the look of this. A lot, right? So, static chassis, before we come out of fusing. It is a static chassis. It lives inside of the hilt. You'll never see this sleeve section or this PCB emitter, right? This whole section here is just married up into the upper part of the hilt. And that's it, right? Let's come up top. Okay, so here we are. The Grif's Malus staff. So this thing is, it's rad. Both hilts are rad. They're both the same, but they're both like, all right, I'm going to get into like why I love machinists like this and work like this. But let's first talk about the chassis, right? So this hilt was sent to me with just the one singular grip and the connector, right? So obviously I've got the grip on one end, and I've got this is exposed because it's meant to marry up into that coupler, right? But anyhow, so here is the chassis. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get a battery really quick. I'm going to put a battery in this guy. So spring side is your negative. Take the flat part of your battery, put it in that battery tray, hit your kill switch.
You got a lot of carbon scoring here. Looks like you boys have seen a lot of action.
Okay, and then I can put my battery cover on. So let's get a closer look at this chassis. I really, really love how these brass parts came out. I mean, I think it just looks fantastic. Especially when you start weathering this brass. So I order all of my brass parts in polished brass rather than raw. I feel as though the detail is a little bit better with polished brass. But once you weather it, that's when you really start to see a lot of the detail come out of these parts. So all of this brass has been weathered, and I think it looks really, really good. Okay, there are those two rectangular LEDs, battery covers here, and there is that exposed crystal chamber up top. Okay. Now, the only difference between the two hilts is in the other hilt. Let me put a battery in this guy.
Red 5 standing by.
In the other hilt, I've got red SMD LEDs up top, just to distinguish between the two of them. Okay. Really, really love how that came out. I know I keep saying that. I probably sound like I'm patting myself on the back. When I do brass parts, brass battery covers, I've said this before, I prefer using larger magnets when space allows. I feel as though having larger magnets on the chassis side just help to make it so much more strong, right? So I'm really happy with the amount of pull that we get with those larger magnets. On the part side, I've got smaller rectangular neodymium magnets. All right. So let's talk a little bit about these hilts, right? At the top of the video, I mentioned how much I can totally appreciate the amount of work that has to go into making a lightsaber look good. And it's small details to me. Okay, small details like, is everything symmetrical? Right? Again, like I'm not a machinist. I don't regularly work on a mill or a lathe, but I can certainly appreciate how difficult it is to make things equal and like make things equally spaced and bilateral, and just to make them look, like they're, like, so this switch box, right? I mean, if you're a millimeter or two off the center, it's going to look like crap. Okay. So like just small things like that. I don't think a lot of people take into account how much work and thought goes into making sure everything looks symmetrical. Not only that, but just, small details like this. I don't know if this is knurling in here. I mean, it probably is. I've never seen knurling like that. These ridges. If it's not knurling, it's some kind of hyper precise mill work. These lines that are here, like just small touches like that, I really appreciate. Super unique. Okay. The pommel, this pommel cap down here with that spike matches the emitter, the blade plug emitter. And that's all machined. That's all custom, right? These are not found objects. Found objects, pommels and greeblies are great, but this has all been done by Brad, and it's just like really, really phenomenal work. Okay, everything was weathered by him. The grips are super, super unique grips, right? This is like copper wire that's been wound around the grip. It's just really, really, really awesome. Like stuff like this. I'm just finding more stuff, right? These just small brass accents, all equally spaced. It's just like all perfect. Okay, this is not just like slapped together, work. So I just really, really appreciate work like this. It just, they look, both of them look beautiful. Okay. And that's it, right? And we've got that giant coupler here. We're going to talk about that in a minute when we do a demo, but it's the same as the grips. It's got that copper wire wound around it. Just great, phenomenal work. Both of the hilts look great. Okay. And that's it, right? Let's come down to the bottom. So let's get a closer look at this chassis. Oops. So there are those rectangular LEDs, that crystal chamber up top. So this is what I was mentioning. Like, you don't see my mic in here. You don't see the whole crystal chamber. There are 3 windows along each side of the hilt that just kind of expose it just a little bit. But if you get up in there and look really closely, you can see all the detail that's going on in there and those SMD LEDs. Really love the look of that. This guy up here. I keep saying it, but I really like the way that came out. Right. So, and here's that other one. Lit emitter. That blade plug looks great. Sounds great. Sounds awesome. All right. So let's put a blade in it. All right, so there is a set screw around front here. I think it's an M2, smaller set screw, that is holding that blade plug in place. Here is that blade plug again. Really cool looking blade plug. And this is a 1-inch blade. 1-inch blade holder. All right, so you want to rest your blade on those PCB pins and then tighten your set screw here. And then you are good to go. That copper wire around this grip feels so unique. It's almost like knurling, but it's not quite. It's this nice tactile feel on the grip. Okay. Let's see what else we put on here. Oops. All right. One more. Such an awesome feeling hilt, right? And of course, why don't we try, let's put this coupler on here so we can go into full staff mode. I'm going to take this blade out because I will likely hit something if I put blades on each end. Yeah, like the threading, buttery smooth threading. It's just like, what I come to expect from somebody like Brad. So here is that giant coupler. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and thread this on, like just perfect threads. And then we'll put the other end on. So one of the things that I was curious about was, if you look at this grip, this coupler, there are no holes in the middle of this for sound venting. But knowing Brad and his work, I am sure there is some kind of sound venting that is going on in the midsection here that is cleverly hidden by this wire because it sounds fine. Sounds great. And this thing's big. It's a lot of fun to swing around. There's that crystal chamber. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. All right, so that's it. That is the Grif's Malus staff from Brad over at Grif's Custom Lightsabers. Just an awesome, awesome, unique, well-made hilt, right? So, yeah, just another, a thing that I don't think people really take into account when they see a custom one-off hilt. I mean, maybe they do, and I'm just ignorant, but that's just something that I always appreciate when I get something that is handmade like this and turn on a lathe. Just small details, small attention to detail that it really makes a piece like these stand out, or pieces like these stand out. So anyhow, to the customer, thank you very much for trusting me with your installs. This one was a lot of fun to design a chassis for and install. If anyone has any questions about this particular install or anything really, please don't be a stranger. And with that being said, may the force be with you always. Have a good one, everybody.